the outcome would be complete knowledge about ICF guidelines and PCC markers on active listening. So we will now go into really what is active listening. So can we, before the slides happen, can we just answer some questions? What do you think we mean by active listening?
May I?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think listening is a conscious effort where you use your brain to assign meaning to the words, and you listen at different levels, the tone of the words, the facial expressions, the body language, and you also listen to the unsaid.
Yeah. Yes. So you're listening beyond words. That's right. Any other perspective?
Yeah, listening has 3 levels. One is internal, external, and global.
Okay. What does that mean?
When you say it is internal, you have to hear it from your mind. Okay. What he's trying to say. When you say external, you should not be bogged down with the external assumptions or anything. Just carefully listen. Global listening is more of trying to integrate a part of it. You know, if you can able to incorporate these 3 listening skills, I think that's a part of active listening.
So you mean that even when you're listening, you should be non-judgmental?
Yes. First, it's all about observing completely. Let them speak, and the assumptions.
Observing without judgment.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Any other perspective?
Yeah, and at times what happens, like adding to what Seema said, sometimes we might get audiovisual clues, like dialogues may not come out completely, but there might be clues which will be given between the lines or between the words. So
you have to read between the lines. Yeah.
Yeah. So paying utmost attention to it and not interrupting.
Absolutely.
Interrupting. For example, like when she was talking, you were waiting for him to complete. Before you could respond back to shave, you were waiting. So that's one of the other part of active listening, where you wait for them to complete, then go ahead.
Okay, sure. So now let's go to the slides. The coach focuses on what the client is and is not saying fully to understand what is being communicated in the context of the client system and to support the client's self-expression. Basically, all what you have said is very right, that the listening is beyond words. The listening is to fully comprehend the client. What is he trying to communicate? Not just in terms of words, in terms of his body language, in terms of his energy levels. You know, is there any shift in emotions? Sometimes when you are talking, you can make out the person is all of a sudden getting angry, or all of a sudden is feeling very low. So that may not come out in words, but that you can perceive. So when you're fully present with the client, you are able to perceive the client completely. So consider the client's context, identity, environment, experiences, values, beliefs to enhance the understanding of what the client is communicating. So it's not just one sentence. Now, in any coaching conversation, you would be integrating right from the beginning to the end what the client is really saying. Similarly, you're integrating from session to session. So you've understood the client, you've understood the who of the client by listening actively. Reflects or summarizes what the client communicated to ensure clarity and understanding. Recognizes and inquires when there is more to what the client is communicating. Yes, as just now we communicated that in between the lines, is there something that is being said in between the lines? What is the real issue? What is coming across? So when you pay attention and actively listen, we are able to understand. Notices, acknowledges, and explores the client's emotions, energy shifts, and non-verbal cues and other behaviors. Integrates the client's words, tone of voice, and body language to determine the full meaning of what is being communicated. Sometimes your expressions when you're hurting somebody, more than the words, if the expressions really give away how hurt the person is. Or similarly, joy, it's the entire body language expressions which you can make out is really joyous, and not just the words. Notice trends in the client's behaviors and emotions across sessions to discern themes and patterns.
Listening actively is an essential competency for coaches. Being able to hear our clients and having our clients feel heard are, to me, the most essential of all of the competencies, because if we don't hear them, it's literally impossible for us to help them to move forward. It's literally impossible to help them to gain clarity. Part of our goal with listening actively is to not hear for our sakes as the coaches, but to help the client to hear themselves as well.
Yes, that's great. I love your distinction there of kind of almost three types of listening. Listening so that you can hear them, that they can hear themselves, but also that they can feel heard. So this is great. This is very similar to the older core competencies. This was number 5, active listening. So what's the update here? A lot of the other core competencies have seemed to change a lot more. This one seems to be a little more similar.
Yeah, I think, with the change of the new competencies, something really crucial has shifted, something really prominent, and that is it's focusing on the verb, on the being and the doing of the coach, as opposed to the noun, the what they are doing, right? So I think the old competency was active listening, which is a thing, right? It's a thing to do. Listens actively speaks to the being and the doing of the coach. And so I think when you consider that little shift, it really does mean that we are participating as partners, and part of what we give to the relationship is our ability to hear fully what is being said verbally, what is being communicated physically and even viscerally, and to be able to reflect that.
Yes, wonderful. And I'm glad you mentioned the difference there with the verbs, because I'm looking through and I'm establishing, maintaining, cultivating, maintains, listens. So it is much more, I guess, active and focused on what the coach is doing. So thank you for drawing that distinction. I hadn't noticed that yet.
Yeah, and how they're being. Right?
Yes, exactly. So let's talk about how they're being when they are being really good at this. Say you as a mentor coach are listening to an MCC level coach. So what is that coach doing that you can kind of glean from a tape, say, when they are doing this really, really well?
Yeah. I think what shows up is their level of attunement to the client. One of the things we listen for as a mentor coach is how is the coach responding to what the client offers, right? How do the coach respond to what is shared, what is coming up? And, when it's done poorly, I'm really listening very tactically so that I can move on to the next thing, right? I'm listening so that I've listened and I can move you. Where when you're doing this really well, you're so present with your client that you are hearing nuances in what's being shared, right? You are making connections in what's coming out of their mouth and what's happening around you. So you're really listening to the system, not just to the words. You're listening to what their body is saying and maybe not saying. Right? You are picking up on things because of your attunement that may be different for the client. One of the new things in the updated competency is that the coach has to consider the client's context. That means listening really empathetically, listening from the client's perspective, not just yours as the coach, so that the experiences that are being shared are not, you're not filtering them through your context, but actually empathetically listening to them through your client's context and helping your client to hear that.
Yes, and this definitely starts to get into some of the additional emphasis on cultural competency that's been becoming much more clear in the core competencies, but also in the ethics. And there's a series that I did coincidentally on that. So if you want to check out the series on the ethics, you can just click right up here and you'll see that series too. But let's dig in a little more, and I want to hear a little more about what specifically you see in a tape, either examples of when it's done well, like what does a question sound like that a coach gives, or examples of when it's not done well, like what kind of question shows up or what kind of statement shows up when you're watching something and you were like, ooh, someone missed an opportunity there to actively listen, or someone really did great at actively listening there.
Yeah, what we're looking for here and listening for is, what is the coach noticing? What is the coach observing? And how is the coach reflecting that back to the client? So, the client is sharing whatever they may be saying, and what we want them to be able to do is to hear that in a way that causes them to disrupt their thinking. So if you notice, for example, a client saying, I'm really excited about this opportunity that I might get in this promotion, you're hearing the words. And if you look on just the words, if you listen to just the words, it's like the client is saying they're excited about this opportunity. But everything else that you're hearing doesn't match, right? So if you notice that, and if you're listening actively, you're putting yourself into a space to really notice. And you can say, I'm noticing that while you're saying you're excited, your body doesn't seem to have a response to that excitement. What do you think about that? Right? It allows the client to really begin to see, yeah, there is something else here, right? So you're noticing in context with what is being said or not said is really important. And so you don't want to see the coach miss those opportunities to help the client see and hear themselves. Another example is, let's say you notice this fidgeting, right? A client is bouncing their knees, or they're starting to speak really with a lot of energy. It's like, this is probably, just a little thing that I have to think about. But they're saying it with such sheer excitement in their voice, or their body is just, like tensing up. These are all important things for us to help our client, for us to notice and help our client with. Sometimes it's maybe contradictory statements. Maybe it's not the body language, but it's listening deeper to hear, I think that I could make a really good entrepreneur. And I've been thinking about that for the last 15 years, that this is something I want to do. Okay. We're making an observation here that 15 years of thinking about it and not doing it, but being exciting, wow, help me understand how you connect those two, or what might be coming up for you if you've been sitting with this for 15 years. What might be holding you back? So the questions that emerge from a coach attend to and respond to the client only if they can listen actively, because that's where you will pick up what is really being communicated. And it allows you to acknowledge and explore not only the words, but definitely you want to explore the words, but you also want to be able to explore all of those nonverbal cues, things that you might not even be able to give a language to, energy that you're sensing. And it's okay to even say, I'm sensing this as you talk. or as I notice X. So this is really, in many ways, the gift that you bring as the coach, and why it's so important to not miss opportunities that will only come if you really stay in that mode of listening actively, focusing on the client so wholly that you hear them through multiple neural pathways.
Yes, so what I'm hearing here, that part of Listens Actively is really about the questions that you ask. So we used to have powerful questions. So powerful questions is kind of here in Listens Actively, and also in the next one that we're about to head off to. Yeah, just comment on that, just really briefly.
Yeah, it's really a great insight, and it's, again, part of the nuance in the competencies and what we expect the coach to be able to flow. When you're listening, if you're serving your client with what you're hearing, you are reflecting that back to them in some way. And that could be a direct reflection of what they said, a mirroring, if you will. It could be summarizing or paraphrasing what they've said. But it also is the inquiries that you make to help them hear what's being said, or to even clarify what was heard. So there is a fair amount of inquiry that will happen here that should come as a direct response to what the client offered. Listening.
So we'll go through the competency markers, and after that we will have an exercise on active listening. We'll split into groups in breakout rooms, and I'll explain the exercise. So the coach's questions and observations are customized by using what the coach has learned about who the client is or the client situation. Yeah, so the coach is questioning and probing on the observations on what he is now learning about who the client is, the who of the client. Coach inquires about or explores the words that the client uses. So if there are certain words which may be meaningful, like for example, in the coaching session that we had with the Shiv today, when he spoke about emotions, I explored on those emotions because there seemed to be a connect between the emotions and his communication. Coach inquires about and explores on the client's emotions. Yes, because we are now listening to the emotions, asking about the emotions, saying, I'm sensing this, as this lady in the video demonstrated. Coach explores the client's energy shifts, non-verbal cues, and other behaviors. Coach inquires about or explores how the client currently perceives himself or her world. Coach allows the client to complete speaking without interrupting. Yeah. Without interrupting, unless there's a stated coaching purpose to do so. Coach succinctly reflects and summarizes what the client communicated to ensure that the clarity and understanding. So basically, we are going to be completely in sync, dancing with the client, understanding the client holistically, observing nonverbal cues, energy shifts, other patterns. We are going to integrate the entire session and previous sessions as well. Allow the client to complete speaking. Don't interrupt unless there's some particular reason to do so, but let the client completely finish and be patient till he does that. And then summarize so that there is a understanding between the two. Yeah, I'll just come to you, Raghunath. Just a minute.
Yeah, so Sushma, we are not having demo. We are directly going for a coaching practice session after.
Yes, I just mentioned that. Mentioned that we'll move into the breakout rooms.
Yes.
So in the previous slide, madam, before you put us onto the breakout room.
Okay.
If you
previous
can.
slide, yeah.
6.6. Yeah. So that point says unless there is a stated coaching purpose to do so. And what can be them?
If you are interrupting, if there is too much of a digression and you would just like to take a pause there and get the person on track.
Yeah, so in practice, Raghu, how it happens that at the start of the session, you have some goal, right? So you agree that is okay, we will discuss on this. But during that particular session, many times client goes here and there. So it's a normal tendency of the client. So it is the responsibility of the coach to bring back the client to the specific goal or the agenda of the session, right? So during that, if you think that now the topic being conveyed by the client is irrelevant to the goal of the session, then you can interrupt the client only then, right? But if the client is talking something which is directly related to the goal of the session, and then if you interrupt, then you are not following the competency marker. But if you interrupt when the client is talking otherwise which is not related to the goal, then actually you are following the competency marker 6.6.